All righty. Welcome back, everyone, to the press conference. We're going to do a recap of what we've been talking about today, centered around We Are Uno, feeding everyone plant-based foods. First, I want to talk about kind of the three big bad wolves that We Are Uno will address, that I predict this is really going to address. One is the addiction to meat and dairy, two addictions and a blindness. The two addictions. The first addiction is to meat and dairy. The second addiction is to money, to give it a word, but it's really way beyond money. It's about private property, ownership, domination of others. You know, I'm this grand poobah, da 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 da, and you're all a bunch of peons, and etc. And the blindness caused by both of those, the two are really related, because the addiction to money, it's addiction to money and dominion. Let's just call it money, dominion, and domination, right? Where one or a group of us are above the rest of y'all other humans, and as well as animals, as well as just nature generally. So the addiction to money is really an addiction to separation, domination, separation and domination. Let's just put it that way. And then that just kind of spills over to the animal kingdom. So if I had to give a single word or a single concept to that which is plaguing us, I would call it separation. And it's causing just tremendous blindness. It's the blindness, the fundamentally thing that it's blinding us from is the unity, the oneness, which is our inherent nature, right? Our natural state, what we're meant to be, is one. And I see We Are Uno as really being the antidote to all three, right? You know, the addiction to separation, the addiction to money, to hoarding, et cetera, it's right now we equate money with survival, right? And we're trapped in this all-day monopoly game of individual hoarding for individual survival. You want to survive, you got to hoard. You want to eat, you need money, right? No money, no food for you. You know, other than the kind of the rare exceptions where there are charities and food banks and whatnot, but those are pretty fringe at this point. So We Are Uno is starting from one of those fringe elements, a fringe feeding operation. And I am committed that it grow to become a huge thing, and that it ultimately liberates us from so many of these, ultimately all of these evils, but starting with separation, right? And liberation from the all-day monopoly game that separation has pushed us into. So the main vector by which I believe We Are Uno can liberate us from the all-day monopoly game is by eliminating the death penalty for losing at the all-day monopoly game, right? Right now, there's a death penalty for losing Monopoly game. You run out of money, you don't get to eat, you die of starvation, a slow, painful death. And because of that, we're really trapped in the game, right? You can't take a break from the game. You can't say, you know what, I'm not going to play this game. You don't play the game, you die, right? You play the game poorly, you die. So to eliminate the death penalty, the only way to eliminate the death penalty is to have food guaranteed for everyone. That's it. Provision food for everyone who wants it. We're not forcing food on everyone. If you still want to play the money game and buy food in a grocery store, have at it. I'll be the last person to try to shut down the grocery sector, et cetera, et cetera. But the goal is to make food available to everyone, right? Freely available, abundantly available, constantly available, not just dead animals on Thanksgiving, but always available all the time. Plant-based foods, very healthy. And so we have this model, which is just absolutely brilliant, pioneered by Ingrid and her fellow volunteers, which is to get food donated from farmers markets, notably produce, and make that. Now, produce being the most expensive component of plant-based stew, getting that donated essentially wipes the cost right out of plant-based stew. Sure, you still have to buy, rice and beans and legumes, but those are so insanely inexpensive to the point that they're less than 10 cents a pound for dry brown rice, dried legumes, dried beans, dried lentils, etc. It's essentially zero. It's essentially free, as long as we're, doing it at sufficient scale, truckloads full, etc. And why not? If we're going to do it, let's do it right. So essentially free rice, beans, potatoes, and free produce. We're just paying for transportation and the heating bill to heat the food up, the energy bill, which is minuscule. Even the transportation costs can come down very, very low, especially with electric vehicles, et cetera. So by making the food essentially zero cost or minimal cost, and those costs can easily be covered by donations, by just anyone who supports it, small donations, large donations, everything in between. We don't really need a lot of money. And so whatever money we raise will easily fund the expansion of this. With that, we'll have food for everyone. Free, abundant food for everyone, without exception, all the time, ongoingly. That will finally liberate us from the all-day Monopoly game. It's the first step in a multi-phase pathway of liberation. The first step is food for everyone. The second is shelter. Third is healthcare. And all these things can be provisioned in degrees, right? Right now, you go to the homeless camps and it's just every tent exposed to all the elements. What if we created a big canopy, right? Protecting a vast area, say like an acre or a few acres from, or, a series of canopies protecting a multi-acre area from rain and sun and, to a certain extent, wind. And then you can pitch your tent underneath it, right, for privacy and whatnot. So, that's kind of a minimum for shelter. We can also build, of course, structures, longhouses, dormitories, whatever, but, a minimum provisioning of shelter. Plant-based foods can easily be gourmet, right? That's one of the objectives of We Are Uno, is gourmet plant-based stew. And then, of course, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. It's all a matter of degrees. When I mention healthcare, the first and most important component of it is food itself. So food addresses food, and it also addresses healthcare simultaneously. If it's good food, good, healthy, immune boosting plant-based foods, right? We also address COVID, which is related to healthcare, but it's really its own separate topic, with both immune boosting and delivering food to all. So people don't have to scramble around and mix it up with, whether they're begging, borrowing, stealing, working, whatever, they have to move around and interact with other people. So there are just so many incredible benefits to We Are Uno, the We Are Uno model. I kind of feel like we're like London a month before modern sewage was put in, We're just on the cusp of it, and the place is just absolutely just putrid with sewage everywhere. And modern sewage is put in, and it's like, what took us so long? And would we ever consider going back to before the days of modern sewage? It's absurd, right? So that's how I feel with We Are Uno. It is just one of those absolutely freaking obvious things that once we have it, it's the first major step towards making all basic human needs basic human rights, thus liberating us finally from this life or death all day Monopoly game. And so it will liberate us from that addiction to separation and domination, and very closely related to liberating us from meat and dairy and animal agriculture of any kind. And those liberations will finally lift from us the blindness that we have to the fact that we are all one, not just all humanity, but all of life on Earth, and in fact, us as being parts of Mother Earth herself as one single Gaia. That's what we're blind to, right? It's like a bunch of people who are locked in an all-day Monopoly game who hate each other and just want to dominate and eliminate each other. They're blind. They're blinded, in that case, probably temporarily. They're blinded to their love for each other because they're just in the wrong mode, except in our case, it's a life or death game. And the thing is, it's become so pervasive. It's just so much a part of our lives growing up and every moment of our lives that we don't even see it as a game. We don't see it as something that we can break free of, right? It's just existence, right? Like a kid born on a raft in the middle of the Pacific Ocean who's never seen land before. When they finally see land, it's like, wait a second, I can get off this raft, I can get off the water and the waves and the sharks and all that. Yeah, right. We can't even see it. Dang it. We're so trapped in it. I'm going to pause recording for a second. I mean, it's like, it's so crazy obvious, right? I'm already feeling like some degree of shame that for humanity, for all of us, that we haven't done this sooner, right? Think of that woman we were watching on that congressional hearing just 2 days ago, right? From West Virginia, just that there's not enough to eat. I mean, it's like, we're so locked in this stupid modality, right? Of buying this crappy food, and not enough of it, and expensive and everything else, that we're just, there's not enough to eat, and what we are eating is crap. And doing the plant-based food essentially for free. I mean, literally the cost. Now, again, we're starting at the fringe. And I've had a little bit of pushback from this, not too much, about, the fact that we're starting from the fringe and getting donations that are kind of the fringe, surplus from farmers markets, et cetera. It doesn't matter. Everything that's worthwhile starts at the fringe. And, beyond the fringe, where does that take us? Well, as we eliminate animal agriculture, the vast majority of land that's used for agriculture becomes liberated as well. And that means that land becomes way less expensive. Agricultural land becomes way less expensive. Once there's an abundance of food, the prices of food will drop. Now, this is assuming climate change doesn't wipe it all out. So we have to be very cognizant and careful for that scenario as well. But we're talking about, if as we eliminate animal agriculture, and grain is far more abundant because it's not being gobbled up by cows and pigs, right? Food becomes even less expensive. And So in that scenario, farming just becomes far less profitable. And in that scenario, we can imagine situations where land is cheap, food is cheap, and people are basically invited to leave the cities, the pandemic-ridden cities, come to the countryside, join these farming communes where you have free shelter, free everything, free food. And of course, we ship food to the cities to help to help fund We Are Uno operations in the cities. And, you know, therein lies just the foundations for a utopia. We don't need all this stuff. And as long as we have free food, free shelter, good, meaningful work in clean, rural environments where most people will, I mean, we're kind of, we'll sort of be going back to the country, back to farming, including urban farming. Why not? But we'll essentially be gravitating towards a new economy of taking care of each other, and where you don't have to stress. If you don't feel like working, or if you're depressed or schizophrenic or whatever, just chill and eat the free food, enjoy the free, delicious, nutritious, immune boosting food. And if you don't have a place to stay, well, we've got all these options for you that are all free, right? Now, sure, sociopaths may still be playing the sociopathic games of hoarding. Who cares, right? I made the analogy earlier that it's kind of like taking kids out of the most violent favela in Rio and transporting them to, a retreat out in the countryside where you can chill out, free food, free shelter. There's just really no, game of money being played at all. And what if somebody sneaks in a Monopoly game, a board game, literally the Monopoly game? Who cares? Let them, right? It becomes a totally optional game, or a much more optional game, rather than a game of life and death, right? That's how I'm looking at it. Will some people still play Monopoly? Sure, they'll play Monopoly. Let them. Who cares? Right? Life will become like a freaking fantasy retreat away from all that crap. And in that context, what do you do when you're on retreats? You grow, you develop, you fall in love with each other, you make new friends, you fall in love with life all over again, right? And you say, thank God I'm here. Thank God I'm not trapped in that old game I was playing, whatever the old game was, right? It's liberation. The new game is liberation and evolution and love and caring. And I mean, how cool if life just became this perpetual retreat, right? And like an eco retreat. How cool would that be? Thoughts?
I feel like that's my whole feeling about this festival. I keep telling you guys about. You guys, like, it's like you were born there. This festival in Guelph, Ontario. I'm still wearing the band from it because I feel like it's a, it's almost like a, it's what I'm doing right now in my life. Like when the last day I was there, I was like um, this sorrow I feel about this ending is related to the fact that why is this just 2 days of the year? Why can't everybody be like this with each other everywhere all the time? Why do we have to go back to the quote unquote real world? You know, um, yeah, like honestly, they had these trust tents that you would go to there, and I went to talk to some people afterwards, and I just choked up. I was like, I don't know how to deal with this. I got to go back to the real world afterwards and pretend that this this violent civilization we live in is the real deal. Um, that's exactly right, James. What if we could live every day sort of like it's a retreat, and people would say immediately, well, that's nice and all, but what about the practicalities? Of course, that's a consideration, but I would submit that we would get a lot more out, not just the pure enjoyment, but people would be inherently more productive. Uh, the greatest, the greatest innovations have come out of people dreaming, of people's imagination, of people having the space to create. Those are the things. China's amazing at industrial production, but they send their students to America because, despite all the problems in America, at least there's a space, there's an encouragement, at least in principle, towards creativity and giving people that space. What if people had that every day? I would submit we'd be even more productive and do better as a civilization, not just because we felt better, but we would create more. But yeah, anyway, you struck a chord back with me because yeah, I mean this room started on the day that this festival was supposed to end, and I'm a big fan of synchronicities, or synchronicities seem to haunt my life, so I cannot not pay attention to them. And so I really feel, at least in my life, that this is a continuation of this. When I was sort of reaching out to the beyond, that I feel like I'm here because I sent out that message, or maybe this place has pulled me into that. This place being the universe. But anyway, yeah, I feel strongly about that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you.
And there are so many conversations today around not just the food, but how feeding people will free them to do other good things. Um, the potential is so much more than just feeding people. It's going to be like, I think it's going to be like just opening the floodgate on creativity to solve all the rest of the problems. Hungry minds don't think well. Empty bellies don't make for clear thinking. Full bellies do. Who knows? I'm not sure we even have comprehended the potential we'll unleash by feeding everybody. I think it's going to surprise us. I think even our higher expectations will be surpassed. Just have that feeling. So many things just click today with the different conversations around resource-based economies and just really taking our lives in our own hands and not expecting some quote unquote benevolent government to do the things that they promised to do but haven't delivered on since let me see, since the beginning of time. We've been shortchanged by every governmental unit that promised to take care of the people. So yeah, it's going to be in finding it hard to find the words even right now. My brain is just like expanding so much with all the possibility. Just feels so good right now. So I'm not going to try and find more words even right now. I just feels very positive. It's so simple, and it's that, you know, sometimes the simplest answer is just the right answer. And I think we found the answer.
Sort of had a thought that it's interesting that there'll be probably a reaction from some people that that if you feed the the masses that they're going to get out of control, that it's good to keep them just a little bit hungry so that they're hungry for success and that they're hungry for, and you know, maybe even more of kind of a misanthropic, uh, partially racist or fully racist idea that, you know, if you feed the starving masses, they're going to overpopulate or this type of thing. We've got this abusive notion that we need to keep people in check. That really is like it's like a lack of belief in the human spirit. It's a lack of an understanding of history even, and it would be a repeat of history in the sense that back in the 1800s when they decided to start paying industrial factory workers uh, better wages, build them housing, put, give them a spiritual center to go to every weekend. At one point, that was like a radical thing to do to take care of your workers. The general consensus within the industrialist community was to just, you know, squeeze the pips till the pip squeak type thing, get as much as you could out of your workers, and who cares if you know, if people die or whatnot. And so industrialists from all over were coming to these experimental facilities where they were taking care of their workers, and they were finding out that even though the workers had more time off, that there was significant investment um, in these extras for the workers, that they were far more productive, they were far more happy, they were far more healthy. I mean, this is a small example of how humans, you know, they don't. This is an ancient idea that we need to be abusive with each other in order to keep people in check, in order to facilitate good behavior, and it's likely based on trauma. You know, the trauma that Jamin talks about that's happened over millennia, and so it's a wholly dysfunctional state of being that's touted as if it's you know, the way to control humanity, and that's what's controlling our governing structures right now. This abusive notion of what humanity is. It's like we've got abusive parents that think they need to kick the shit out of you to keep you in line, and if they would just leave you alone, you'd be able to go and flourish. You know, you know, we're not doing very well if that's what the medicine is, because if that's what the medicine is, um, yeah, I mean, why are so many people in jail? Anyway, I'm going to pass the talking for
And I think it's also important to point out to, you know, for today, you know, if we're summarizing that it's evening here in my neck of the woods, but earlier today, uh, we were working with people from, who was in the room earlier today for the conversations. We had Spain, we had Hungary, we had the UK, we had Mexico, we had Michigan, Canada, uh, California, Washington State, uh, South Dakota. You know, this isn't just, you know, we're not an aberration off at some corner of the world. We're the world united. Very important element of what's going on right now, because we're we're not going to be boxed in by any force that may decide we're that the public taking responsibility for ourselves is something that needs to be put down, because we're not in one spot. We can't be boxed in. We're everywhere. And the waking up is happening everywhere.
Yeah, that just made me think, Marco. It's the characteristics of them of all of this are incredibly subversive. Like, not in what we believe, well, what we believe too, but more so in what we're being and what we're doing. To the narrative of violence, the narrative of separation, the the narrative that things aren't all one, and the fact that we're global is another feature of that. I think these guys are going to have to let up. These guys being the people that believe in a violent approach to the boot to the neck crowd. I think are going to have trouble attacking this, have trouble doing what they normally do when we're not preaching something directly. We're just being. And so the subversive factor is like way higher than it normally would be, just because we're global, like you're saying, multinational. The moral imperative supports us. Like, who can argue with this? It's not like something that you can create some sort of argument against us. You're feeding people. What is the argument against that? Yeah, I don't know. I just see it as incredibly subversive, and in the fight against, maybe using the word fight's a bad idea, but in sort of replacing the way of being that's been violent for the past 10,000 years. I think it's more subversive than we realize. The more I think about it.
Yeah, and we did actually have some pushback, a small argument about giving food as a right, rather than the argument of if you give a fish, they eat for a day. If you teach them to fish, and the person that brought that up, ultimately, after we'd gone around a few times, all we could do was compliment each other and congratulate each other on being able to see the other point, and how that the common goal is just coming together, and that we will I don't know quite how to say it, but there was a little bit of that pushback, but not enough to even matter. It was barely a ripple, and it became very much about how this is going to work, that we can all see it coming. We can all see the goal. We're so close. We can smell it and taste it. Everything, but actually be able to publish it's a done fact.
What you got there, Alchemy? Share with us.
I didn't interrupt. This is my wife. She passed on Valentine's.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry. I'm grieving, and this is just part of the process. Bear with me.
Yeah.